Cato the Elder was an underappreciated historical figure whose importance on human history cannot be overstated. Even though he was never an emperor, it is safe to say that he truly made Rome great again, in a very real sense, as it was starting to decline after losing its very culture and language to Greek influence. In fact, it's arguable he is the catalyst that brought about the Roman Empire as we know it today, and without him it very likely would have been a state that fizzled out before Julius Caesar was even born, just like so many once great Mediterranean city-states of that era, many of which no longer have writings that survived them, and a lot of which don't even have names anymore. Unlike many politicians of the time, and virtually all in the modern era, his thinking was firmly grounded in concrete goals. When it came to measuring success, his criteria was very simple.
There is a famous saying of old Cato's. When asked how best to make an estate most profitable, he replied, "Successfully raising cattle." And second best, raising cattle with some success. And third, raising cattle with little success.
Cattle was the real wealth of a nation, and that is where the word pecuniary originates. Our real wealth today is also based on real production of goods, but especially when it comes to high quality food. Without proper nutrition, nothing else matters and nothing else significant can be accomplished or produced. It's often said that beef built the British Empire, and while the survivors of the potato famine in Ireland were a sad and diseased lot, the Irish who gave in and became British soldiers were well known for their size and strength because they were fed 2 pounds of beef a day. We can also see this today as more people move to plant-based food alternatives. Just look at Lee Marvin or John Wayne compared to any modern actor. As the food industry and politicians become more and more divorced from reality in this regard, the decay in our society is becoming more and more palpable.
Is this a hospital or... Actually, I don't even know where I am. Oh my God.
You're not unscannable, are you?
Oh my God!
Good gravy.
Oh, thank you. It's just brown and water.
On a side note, you have to be very wary of historians today, who are often no longer people who want to preserve our past, but people who have a bone to pick. For example, it is now the quote-unquote consensus that the thumbs up and thumbs down sign does not come from the Roman arena, and that we have no idea what signs they used. And also that the thumbs up, thumbs down signs come from the Flying Tigers in China, which were American pilots who fought against the Japanese, and that this actually came from the Chinese people. However, this painting from 1872 clearly shows the thumbs down sign, and I've seen much older ones too. Maybe not going back to the time of Caesar, but it's clear this has been a part of our culture for a long time. I've also seen pre-war photos of Italian servicemen giving the thumbs up, so that story is just patently false. Unfortunately, just like with the government nutritional guidelines, we have to take everything with a grain of salt today, but I'll do my best to keep them honest.
Yes, and she's scrabbling around to get them back on again, but even before she can get her knickers on, I've seen everything. I've seen it all.
And that's ultimately why I made this video. I can't even count the times I've seen gravy maligned in movies and TV shows as supposedly being unhealthy or somehow bad for you.
Now wait a second. You doctors have been telling us to drink 8 glasses of gravy a day.
In reality, gravy is one of the healthiest foods there is, and has lots of benefits for everything from your skin to your brain and even your digestion. It's also one of the main nutrition sources that we're neglecting compared to a century ago. People who don't make roasts might not know what gravy even is, which is probably why gravy gets a lot of abuse by the media, but it is actually mainly broth, or better yet, stock. This is full of all the amino acids your body needs to be healthy in a very easy to digest form. It's also extremely high in glycine, which along with taurine, is one of the main nutritional elements you're lacking today compared to people just 1 century ago.
Why are we deficient in glycine? Well, We all know that we have to eat whole grains in order to get the B vitamins we need. We discovered that 100 years ago. Whole grains, fine, but what about the whole pig, the whole chicken, and the whole fish, and the whole cow? Right, we cut off the muscle meats and we throw the bones away. But everybody knows grandma's chicken soup is so good for you. Why? Because you're boiling the collagen out of the bones. That's the protein, and that's where most of the glycine is. Well, it turns out that glycine is also an amino acid that, as the free amino acid, is needed in high concentration all the time in your body to keep those cells that do the inflammation from being hyperactive.
Broth and gravy were not only a part of most meals not that long ago, but broth was also the traditional sickbed food and the food of the elderly. Nowadays, the sick care industry gives the sick an IV drip full of glucose and sodium. This wreaks havoc on the immune system and can even lead to inflammation and physical damage, as this causes the human body to hold on to excessive amounts of water. When not closely monitored, this can be very damaging or even life-threatening. And this is not even a treatment, just standard operating procedure. But if they don't keep track of it properly, you could die. Now, sometimes people ask me what I eat, and I always tell them the same thing.
A, B, C. A always B, B, C.
Crockpotting.
Always be
Crockpotting. Always be crockpotting. People are so used to eating artificial foods and side dishes designed to fill you up or stimulate appetite that they no longer seem to understand just what real food actually is, what's there for flavoring, and what's there as a food substitute meant to stave off starvation.
It became really popular in Victorian times. Back then, people didn't have ovens in their house, and so they would actually take their joint of beef with them on the way to church and stop off at the baker's. The Yorkshire puddings were actually invented, I think, created as a way of actually filling up the family so that they didn't have too much beef. Beef was very expensive.
When you make gravy, you typically take a broth or stock from a roast, then you add a thickener like cornstarch and some spices and simmer it for a while. I don't use cornstarch, but sometimes I use a small amount of wheat, which seems to do a much better job of thickening it up. When possible, I use stock instead, which is usually not a problem since I make roasts a lot. This is boiled down broth and bones that is packed full of glycine, amino acids, and other nutrients. A lot of taurine and creatine move into these juices as you cook, among other nutrients, so it does behoove you to make use of it. You can add in a wide variety of flavors, but I prefer to put in a little garlic and pepper and a large amount of homegrown rosemary. I just put the whole sticks in and then strain it out afterwards. I also put in a little balsamic vinegar, which goes well with almost everything, but especially gravy. Then I boil it down a bit and let it cool a bit, and it's ready to serve. Most recipes call for skimming the fat off the top of the gravy as you make it. Otherwise, it's pretty much fat-free. Since I don't believe in the lies told about saturated fat, I don't do that. I just leave the fat in. While it's not gravy, another thing I do to make a sauce is use better than bouillon, organic stock, no affiliation, and add it to some heavy cream or some sour cream. This is a quick way to get a nice sauce for minimal effort. Speaking of fat, I have to address something that is coming up constantly and has since I started the channel. People will say they ate more protein and got fat, but this is physiologically impossible. In fact, experimentally, it is shown that eating more protein will always lead to less body fat and more lean tissue when the other factors are kept the same. There's many reasons why you may think this is the case, but it's not. If you eat less fat, this can actually cause weight gain too. Over time, your body will slow metabolism if you eat too little fat because your body senses a lack of energy coming in. Lack of fat in a meal also makes the insulin spike higher after the meal. So if you do add in more protein, don't do it at the cost of the fat in the meal. When you have a low-fat meal, it also bloats the belly. In spite of the craziness of nutritional propaganda, it's fat that allows food to move through the digestive tract without getting stopped up. Eating super lean meat is the last thing you want to do when it comes to your digestion, as it's almost guaranteed that this is gonna slow things down and bloat your belly a little bit. Since many people are confused by this, I just thought I'd stick this in here so I don't have to make a whole video on it or explain it over and over again in the comments. When the gravy is done, I keep what's left in a jar in the fridge, and this also goes great on hamburger patties. Plain, dry hamburger patties are one of the saddest meals imaginable, but when you add a little well-made gravy, it becomes a nice meal. I think trying low-carb meals like this are one reason people get discouraged with low-carb diets. I can't blame them, but learning to cook takes time, and while many carnivores will tell you to avoid everything but salt, I find that spices make meat taste amazing so long as you can tolerate those spices, and many of those spices have a lot of health benefits. I suspect we like their taste for a reason, and this is borne out by the many benefits of things like rosemary and oregano, especially for digestive and dental health. Adding butter or cream to the gravy can also be quite nice, and stearic acid, which is common in dairy and beef fat, is especially beneficial to your mitochondria. Though I like to add bones to the broth I use for gravy, I mainly stick to beef bones. Pork and chicken bones could help concentrate lead into the broth, though the amount is tiny compared to, say, the arsenic in rice, and you consume a much smaller amount. Obviously, it's better to keep lead as low as possible. You can also skip the bones and just use the juices from boneless roasts, which will still have many of the same benefits and probably has less lead in it than your tap water does. Broth has been shown to help a great deal with ulcerative colitis and other gut issues. It's also full of amino acids and other nutrients that have benefits for the gut in their own right, such as carnosine, glycine, and glutamate. Broth exposure early in life has been shown to prevent migraines later in life in animal studies. It's also been shown to help a great deal in autoimmune issues, which is largely driven by leaky gut. Leaky gut allows large proteins, which are supposed to be kept out of the bloodstream, to directly enter, which causes problems in the body. This leads the body to produce antibodies against these proteins, and this can accidentally cause autoimmune damage to the rest of the body, especially to the thyroid, which is particularly vulnerable. And this is why a diet heavy in broth, which avoids wheat, has been shown to dramatically reduce the symptoms of Hashimoto's thyroiditis. When it comes to nutritional information, every day seems to be opposite day in our corrupt world. Gravy is denigrated and joked about, but its base is one of the healthiest foods imaginable, broth. Gravy with cream or butter added is also very healthy, but saturated fat phobia is a whole topic in its own right. Broth is a good source of glycine, carnosine, anserine, and many other useful nutrients that are going to help modulate immune reactions and do much more in the body. It is also extremely digestible and makes a wonderful sickbed food or a food for the elderly and frail, but in modern times they just can't be bothered to actually care for the sick. They just want to plug them into a machine. It also has amazing effects on both digestion and repairing the digestive tract, and can even play a major role in preventing or moderating autoimmune disease and leaky gut. When you avoid fake foods that come in a package, your taste buds will help you find not only what you love, but also what you need. So don't be shy in asking for more.
You like the juice, eh?
Yeah,
The juice is good, eh?
yeah, it's
I get you more juice. You like the juice, eh?